Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock, Drogheda. I'm Nick Park, and these days my wife Janice and I, we have a house out in Drammin in County Louth, and we've lived there for about 20 years. But before we built that house, we were moving around from place to place, renting different houses, and sometimes even people very graciously allowed us to stay in houses for a while rent-free, which was a wonderful blessing when times were tough. But I remember one house in particular. It was in Annagassan. And it was right down by the beach, which was wonderful in some respects because you could just take the dogs out and walk them along the beach. But I want to tell you, in winter, it was cold and it was so windy. The wind was so strong. Sometimes you wondered if the panes of glass were going to burst out of the windows because of the strength of the wind. And it was actually a bungalow divided into two, and the dividing wall was very thin. Had been put in very amateurishly. And so our bedroom was a very thin wall between us and the kitchen of where the old woman lived next door. And in fact, there's one night I was asleep in bed, and the woman's daughter brought her home, and she was preparing something in the kitchen and talking to her mother. She had her head down in the kitchen cupboards as she was talking, and they amplified her voice, and it sounded like she was in the bedroom with me. I jumped out of my bed in absolute shock when it happened. But the other thing I remember most about that house was the day that I destroyed the porch, which is not a good thing for a tenant in a rented house to do, I know. But I was in a hurry to get to church, and I was quickly reversing in the driveway, and I reversed the car into the porch. And the porch just collapsed. Now, the car wasn't even scratched. I hardly hit it at all, but the whole porch collapsed. And the next day I was looking at it, trying to figure out how this had happened, and I realised it had virtually no foundations, that the porch had just been built, as it were, on the ground with no stone foundation underneath it. So it was no surprise it fell down, which reminds me of a passage in the Bible. And of course, it's from Matthew chapter 7 and verse 24. Therefore, Jesus said, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash, just like my porch. Now, what Jesus was saying was that his words are the foundation on which we must build our lives. And if we don't build our lives on the words of Jesus, not just on the Bible, but on the words of Jesus, if we don't build our lives on the words of Jesus, then we are being foolish. But if we build our house, build our lives on the foundation of the words of Jesus, then Jesus said we are like the wise man who built his house on a rock. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe the entire Bible is the Word of God, Old Testament and New Testament, all 39 books of the Old Testament and all 27 books of the New Testament, the entire Word of God. I believe that with all my heart. But I believe there is a foundational quality to the words of Jesus Christ. I thank God for Moses. I thank God for the prophets. I thank God for the Apostle Paul and Peter and James and all the other writers. But the words of Jesus are foundational, and Jesus himself said that. And if we are going to live as disciples of Jesus Christ, then we need to build our lives upon his words. And I would encourage you to do that. Don't be a fool. Build your house on the solid rock of the words of Jesus Christ. God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock, Drogheda.